All right, well, it's 3 o'clock. We'll get going here. Thanks for joining us today, everybody, on a snowy winter day in Truckee. Awesome. Well, hopefully people are skiing or having some type of fun out there. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is the third workshop for the Community Wildfire Prevention Grant Program offered by Truckee Fire. This presentation will probably be a little bit shorter than the ones in the past, and it will be recorded so that you can watch it. Today, please do stay muted during the meeting. I think your mics are off. And if you have any questions, put your questions in the chat. There'll be plenty of time once I'm done speaking to answer direct questions as needed. Today, we're going to talk about how to be competitive with grant writing and project design. And so we'll talk about, how to think about landscape level context and project benefits, designing projects that benefit vulnerable populations, administrative capacity, and got some more people coming in, and local plans. So again, this one will be a little shorter. We'll have plenty of time after to chat through any questions that come up. A lot of these discussions, we dive pretty deep when we do the consultation on a couple, these are usually the topics that we talk about pretty in depth in consultation. And so, Brittany, is your mic still on? Somebody is.
No, not
I think Ann is. Okay, we're good. So yeah, we usually talk pretty in depth these topics in consultation and in office hours and one-on-ones and stuff like that, because they are a little bit more nuanced and can get pretty specific. So let's get into it. Let's first talk about the grant application. We'll talk about this in our last workshop, but I just wanted to show people what the application looks like. So this is the workbook on our website. And as we scroll through here, there's project ID, title, stuff that we talked about last week, including kind of project information, what type of project you're selecting, keeping in mind that some projects are a little bit harder than others. Scope of work we discussed last week, collaboration and local support. I want people to notice, we're only asking on some of these questions 300 words. So we're not asking for a senior thesis here in a novel. Like, it can be very concise, direct, to the point. Let's scroll down here to, we talked about environmental compliance last week, and we're going to talk about landscape level context and project benefits today. It's worth 5 points. Again, we're only asking for 300 words, folks. So these are direct, clear. We don't need extra fluff in these prompts. It can be bullet points, a few sentences, get to the point. Make sure that you're looking back at the procedural guide and what we're grading you on so you can maximize your points. So today we're going to talk about landscape level context, vulnerable populations, administrative capacity, local and regional plans and assessments, compatibility. So these are all specific prompts in the application that we're looking for you to answer, and we'll talk about how we go about answering those things today. So, landscape level context. There's a specific resource available to you that we're going to explore today a little bit, and that is our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And we're going to take a look at that right now, show you how to navigate to it, and then kind of show you how we think about landscape level context for all projects. So We have a community wildfire protection plan specific to the Truckee Fire Protection District. It is an industry-leading example of how a community wildfire protection plan should look and be presented to the public. You can access this from our website. Let's just do that right now. So you can go to truckeefire.org/CWPP. It kicks you to kind of a landing page, and you're going to want to scroll down. We'll talk about this in a second. You want to look, view the CWPP story map. And our website is currently undergoing some changes, so this should be a little bit more easier for people to access. But within the Community Wildfire Protection landing page, this is a plan for the community. It was drafted in the first year of Measure T in 2022, and we have a couple different options here. You can read the entire document. It's quite large. But we also have a story map that's kind of a high-level overview in kind of a fun, interactive way. So if we go into the story map, we want all of our community members to know that this is available. And I think that if you are engaged in wildfire or concerned about wildfire in Truckee, you should make yourself pretty familiar with this plan. This is what we're basically telling the community what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what the risks are. So there's an introduction. You kind of scroll through this, and there's tons of information in here. Again, this is the story map, so this isn't the actual document. It's just kind of a high-level summary. Good to dig into this, understand what's in here, educate yourself, right? We have wildland-urban interface maps, which can be important for kind of talking about landscape level context, like where are you in the WUI? The yellow colors, let's just zoom in on Glenshire here, is what we're calling the intermix. There's a legend, there should be a legend somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, yellow's intermixed, orange is defense zone, red is threat zone. So depending on where you're proposing your project, it may be worth mentioning whether it's in, hey, we're proposing a project within the Truckee, intermixed zone in these yellow areas, or I'm proposing a project in the threat zone, out, in the wildland. So this is a good map to kind of reference where you're at in the community and what zone we've kind of placed you in based on your location. You can keep scrolling to understand vegetation and fuel models and learn about all of that. Interactive kind of slide map here. You can keep scrolling and you can understand some fire history. So this map's actually pretty cool. It shows all the fires. If you scroll this out from 1908 to 2022, and you can zoom in, interact with this map, understand which fire occurred there. So if I'm presenting a project and I'm trying to be competitive and I'm talking about landscape level context, it's good to know if a fire has occurred in this area in recent history or, in recorded history. So there's a good map here showing all of the fires. And, we talk about Truckee being kind of the cream and the Oreo that hasn't, our district specifically really hasn't experienced a lot of wildfire impacts compared to other places just north, south, east, and west of us. And so this is, a good map to reference. Keep scrolling and you can understand fire size and year. There's good information in here that you can pull from for your application. And if we keep scrolling, you basically want to end up getting to the risk assessment. And this is a risk assessment map. And so a risk assessment map is very specific. It's the culmination of the hazard, which is the likelihood and intensity of a wildfire occurring. And the risk is what's being displayed here is the hazard plus the exposure and susceptibility to that hazard. So the very dark red areas on this map have an extreme hazard and risk assessment. So where am I proposing my project in relation to the WUI that we looked at last? Where am I, proposing the project in relation to the Truckee fire risk assessment? Am I proposing a project in one of these very dark red extreme zones? That is important information to, quickly state in your application. There's, obviously as we work towards the summit, we have a lot of granite. It gets a little bit lower, but these maps are available to everybody to understand where you are. And you can zoom in at a fine scale and look at, neighborhood level considerations and where the risk is in your neighborhood. And so these are good things, to be referencing in your application. Hey, this project occurs in the wild and urban interface intermix and defense zones. It is classified as an extreme risk and hazard. And we are, proposing to reduce that by this, implementing this project. Another important map to consider is the mitigation strategies map. And this is an important section to read in the CWPP. And this is a cool map. We'll talk about this a lot today. If you scroll this to the right, there's two different maps in here. So if I scroll left, I have a different map than when I scroll right. We're going to scroll to the right. This is our CWPP treatment tracker map. And so within this, there's a legend. The green polygons are recently completed treatments. The orange polygons are projects that are in implementation right now. And the planned and the purple hashed areas are projects that are planned to occur within the next basically 1 to 3 years. So you can interact with this map. You can understand, hey, what was this project here specifically? There's the project name, the status of the project, the type of treatment that occurred, what activities happened on this piece of property, how many acres did we treat, who implemented, what is the purpose of the project. So we use this map to show basically landscape level context in relation to our project. So if I'm proposing a project in this area, I have a couple different examples that I can pull from to put down in my narrative in my application. Hey, I am proposing a project that is immediately adjacent to the Sierra Meadows Community Fuel Reduction Project, as well as the Big Jack East project completed, in these years. This project is an extension of that work and will basically provide greater benefits to the community by increasing the acres treated adjacent to these previously treated areas. A good example is this polygon here. We talked about this project earlier. This is the Tundra TDPUD partnership. This was a grant that we awarded. It has been completed, but this polygon wasn't here before, right? But they had a purple polygon for a planned project, and they had this polygon up here for a completed project. And they very strategically proposed the project to kind of connect the dots and show that, hey, we are trying to build off of previously completed treatments. If we're not proposing a forest fuels reduction project, but maybe a different type of project like home hardening, this is still meaningful to you. You can make a case that, say I'm in the Boulders and I want to do a home hardening rebate project for all the condominiums. I can pretty easily say that, hey, I see that there's a planned project called Jackass to Point to Coldstream. It's currently in planning. I have another recently completed project, the Central Truckee WUI Phase 1 project. My project related to home hardening will, increase the efficiency of this work and ensure greater community protection by, hardening the structures to be more resilient and resistant to wildfire. And in relation to these projects adjacent to me, this is, a beneficial project for X, Y, and Z reasons. So this map is important to dig into, and we're going to do some edits to try to make this more public facing on our website, but this map is for the community. I spend hours working on this to try to make it clear for people, to update it regularly. So please use it when you're designing your projects to understand what has happened near you and adjacent to you. And you can get a ton of information from this map. So we'll talk about some other resources available to folks, but that's really the key to telling a story in your grant narration about landscape level context is where am I in relation to everything else? What is the specific hazard in my area and what has been done around me that I can build off of? Another section to this is project benefits. And so project benefits, this could just be, again, a quick like bullet list. There are both direct and indirect benefits, also known as co-benefits to every project. It's important to be realistic and think about how your project directly supports wildfire resiliency and kind of list that here. So a direct benefit is something immediate, right? An obvious thing that's directly linked to a specific action. So number of acres treated, number of homes protected, stuff like that. Quantifiable usually is a direct benefit, is something that we can quantify. An indirect benefit is a more broader kind of long-term effect of the activity. So increased wildfire resilience, firefighter safety. I'm going to be honest with folks, like we have all of these AI interfaces these days, whether it's Chat GPT or Google. I could probably come up with a pretty good answer these days by plugging in, hey, Chat GPT, what is some direct and indirect benefits of this type of project that I'm proposing? And you can, again, we're only looking for 300 words for this prompt. So it's a couple sentences, some bullet points, very direct to the point. This is all worth 5 points. Again, this is taken direct from the procedural guide. So you should be looking at the evaluation criteria before you start prompting your responses. And this is stuff that we all just talked about. Is it part of a larger plan, coordinated effort? Is it proximate to essential community services or other amenities? Does it support community level benefits? What are those benefits? So we're very clear here on what we're trying to get people to say to us. And so you want to make sure that you're maximizing your points and answering these questions pretty directly. Vulnerable and priority populations. This is worth 5 points as well. And this really is to try to prioritize projects that do have direct benefits to these types of populations. What is a vulnerable or priority population? It could be considered also like a disadvantaged community. So in Truckee, think about folks or people that if we have a major wildfire disturbance, who is going to be displaced or disproportionately displaced as a result of that. That's usually minority populations such as our Latino community and non-English speaking residents, people that are 65 years or older, people with disabilities, or single parent or single income households. Not every project is going to target these populations directly. So don't make stuff up and don't kill yourself trying to do a demographic study of your community. That's not necessary for this grant. These types of projects are usually community wildfire prevention education projects. For example, we funded a grant last year with the COAD, which is Communities Organized Around Disaster. And they specifically wrote a grant to try to target non-English speaking residents in our district to give them materials such as go bags, evacuation checklists, sign them up for emergency alert services. And so a very specific project tailored to that community. Not every project is going to have a direct benefit to these populations, especially in Truckee. We are a pretty affluent community. And so maybe this doesn't always apply to your project. But so don't kill yourself on this. Don't feel like you have to do a full, demographic study. If you know the general kind of demographics of your community, like you can state that, hey, generally this community has people that are aged 65 or older and would be considered a vulnerable population. This project is taking place on X amount of properties with, people of such age or, of the like, if that makes sense. So these types of projects, if you're actually going to design a project to address the need for a vulnerable population, it's usually going to be a professional organization because it does take a lot more coordination and thought to design a project that has a meaningful impact for those communities. So if your project doesn't have any benefits to these types of populations, you should so state. But if it does, or if you can, get some make some indirect kind of ties to these benefits to these types of populations, that will help your application. Again, it's not necessarily a requirement by any means, but it is an important part of the storytelling. Another important one is grantees' administrative capacity and past forest management history. This is a specific prompt, again, in the application like we looked at. Keep in mind, as I stated kind of in the beginning of the first workshop, really this whole process is your test. So if you're able to get through this process, write an application, be successful, you're going to be pretty successful with administering a grant. Obviously, this is a local program. And so I assist people quite often on just kind of getting through some processes. But we do need to have grantees understand that if you get a grant, it is your responsibility to administer that grant. We can support you with some things, but we can't necessarily take on the administration of the grant for you. That's not the point of the program, right? The point is to increase capacities in our community and share resources, share funding, get more done together. So part of this application, if we're thinking about what we want to put in this prompt, it's good to consider your own professional experience and how it relates to something like responsibly managing public funds. That could be an accounting job, or if you had some contract administration experience or project management not related to forestry or these types of grant opportunities, like that's fine to state. I think we've awarded grants to financial managers and people that have responsibility of accounting and managing funds, and they understand this process and the reporting that comes with it. And again, this isn't meant to be something that is a barrier for people. It's okay if you don't have any experience at all. Like, this is why we're doing workshops. This is why we make the program available to our community, is we want to coach people through this process and make sure they're comfortable with it. So another option, if you're like really uncomfortable with project management and you don't feel comfortable taking on such a project, is to reach out to other people within your community or your neighbors that maybe do have that experience or are comfortable with that. Or if my project is near a public agency or a non-governmental organization, maybe I could reach out to those folks to see if they're interested in going in on this grant with me and helping us write it and administer it. So this is not meant to be a barrier. It's a lot easier to answer when you have managed and implemented many grants, such as myself. But like when we get these prompts on state and federal grants, we have a long list of projects that we can demonstrate that we've completed, that demonstrate our administrative capacity to take on funding. So don't let this discourage you. There is no requirement to be a grant expert to apply and be successful with this grant. In fact, most of the grants that we have awarded have been to people that have never managed a grant before. So really, this program is designed for the community, and we want to help you through it. So try to, answer this question in a way that shows an acceptable amount of experience and whatever experience you have professionally. And again, if you can get through this process and this application, you're going to be pretty successful with administering a grant. This is a hard part of the process, and while implementing a grant is very, can be difficult, uh, you know, this kind of process we've put together is a good test for people to make sure that they're comfortable administering these projects. The last one is local and regional plans and assessment compatibility. Again, we're only asking for, I believe, 300 words. Let's see. Yeah, short and sweet. And let's talk about this. This is right back to the CWPP, and there's a couple things to think about when we're talking about local and regional plans assessment compatibility. When we talk about regional plans, it's really the Truckee CWPP. A local plan could be my Firewise community action plan that I'm trying to implement. If you can demonstrate compatibility with something like that, that's beneficial to state in your application. So if we go back to the CWPP, there's a couple of resources right back to the same map, except I'm going to scroll it all the way to the left. And this is our resilient landscapes map. This is a map that basically shows modeled outputs of where we have determined, good high priority projects should be implemented. So again, there's a excuse me, there's a legend. Basically, the green, we call this the money map. Like anywhere that is green and gold is going to be a project that is consistent with the Truckee CWPP. So if we zoom in to the area that I kind of gave an example of a project we funded here, we see that we have a mix of some green, which is kind of a consensus scenario. This is a good project. And we see some of this orange or gold color, which would be kind of our highest priority projects. So if I am proposing a project that is in this area that kind of mixes in some green and some gold, like I'm probably on the right track with compatibility with the plan. And that's a good thing to try to demonstrate based on where you're proposing your project. There are some community inputs when we did our community meetings where people said, hey, I want a project here. And so this is what the blue is calling out. And we can make kind of indirect references to some of these areas, but we want to try to design projects that are within our land tender scenario map. It's okay if your project is not within it. There are other ways to demonstrate compatibility with local assessments. It could be your Firewise action plan. It could be looking at some of the federal documents where they're prioritizing some projects in the community. It could be community inputs of people that are, came to our meetings and said that they wanted projects in these areas. So if there's questions about, hey, I got a project and I'm not even close to this, like, what do I do? Like, how do I state that this is, an important project and tie into this compatibility? That's why we have office hours, and that's why I make myself available for consultation, because we can talk about that and we can kind of figure out what direction we want to go there. There's another resource to be aware of as well that can help. We have a public dashboard. And this is a similar style map, but this is kind of rolling up some high numbers. And so I can do a similar thing where I can understand, okay, I've got 23 projects that have resilient landscapes. Only 13 have wildfire response. We only have 13 projects. If I'm proposing a project that improves an evacuation route, I could probably use that to my advantage. Hey, I see that Truckee Fire has only implemented 13 projects in support of wildfire response. Hey, this project's going to increase that number of projects by securing an evacuation route. Or if I'm proposing some kind of home hardening program, hey, I'm doing a project that supports fire adapted communities. There's also matrix tables in the story map, if I can find it. So in this mitigation strategies tab, as you scroll down, this is talking about restoring and maintaining landscapes, which is forest fuels reduction projects. And you might want to read through this and pull some of this into your application. I'm not going to read it all here today, but we have these tables at the end of this section. So if I'm proposing a forest fuels reduction project, I could go into this table and I could try to tie my project to one of these project IDs. So, hey, obviously I'm applying for a grant, but I'm going to implement a community fuel break and fuel reduction project using, the CWPP. So, hey, I'm advancing RL number 2 as part of the Truckee CWPP, kind of tying into that plan. There are several other matrix tables. As you scroll down, there's fire adapted communities, and this would be more focused on public education and reducing structural ignitability. So community wildfire preparedness, community wildfire education. Again, you can read the information. There's a matrix table that summarizes these recommendations that we have created for the community. And I can tie my project back to some of these codes potentially, depending on what I'm implementing. So long story long, please, like everybody should be plugging into the CWPP, understanding the information that's in here, and this helps you write your grant and helps you demonstrate regional capacity or assessment compatibility, and as well as landscape level context and project benefits. Again, these are things that we can dive more deeply into in consultation or office hours. It's just a high level overview. And again, we recommend that everybody should plug into that story map and understand that information. It is worth 5 points. Some other plans that are out there that are pretty easy to find would be kind of the CAL FIRE unit plan. There's a county, fire plan. There's also a county level CWPP. Other things that we can talk about if we're struggling to find compatibility to the Truckee CWPP, we can usually find something else that we can tie it to. Perfect. So to wrap this up, I promised a short one here. Again, please, take a look at the CWPP, at least scroll through it and read the high level information and understand what we've, put together. It really was prepared for the community. As demonstrated today, prompts specific to what we discussed are asked in the online application. So spend time on this process, complete the prompts thoughtfully. Again, we're not looking for a dissertation. We want direct information that is answering the question as directly as possible. I might have missed something there. Yeah, schedule consultation with me and we'll cover all of these concepts in more depth as needed. There are other programs to consider. As we've mentioned, there's a microgrant program that the county offers, and there's a couple other cost share programs that if you're interested in, you should reach out to me and we can talk about those details. We have one more workshop coming up in March 5th. It'll be another short one. We'll talk about application submission and understand the mapping needs that people have so that I can make maps for everybody and make sure everyone's taken care of and has the resources they need to move forward into application writing. We also will offer several office hours with those dates listed that you can sign up for. I show up every time from 3 to 4, and that's really the time for you all to ask very direct, specific questions. I've been a little underwhelmed with the participation in office hours, which is fine. Usually it's just me sitting in a virtual room with nobody signing in. So take advantage of that. That could be an hour of one-to-one time with me, working through this stuff. So attend those office hours, schedule consultations. Let's help you get through this. This doesn't need to be a big, scary, long process. I think we can break things down and make them a little bit easier for people as we talk through it. As always, our grant webpage has all the information you need. I'm here as a resource, and you can always email grants@truckeefire.org if you have questions or email myself. With that, I'll open it up to any questions that we have. I'll stop sharing.
We did have one question regarding would the density of people in an area be worth mentioning in the application?
Absolutely, 100%. That's part of that, telling the story and making sure that the review committee, which is not myself, I don't review these grants. And the review committee is told to avoid any biases. They're only allowed to, read and take information from the application and nowhere else. So you want to try to fit as much information as there as possible.
Thanks, Dillon. We have not had any additional questions in the chat. If anyone does have questions, feel free to raise your hand. Up top, there's a little hand emoji, or type your question in the chat.
Well, it must have been a riveting conversation. I got so many questions, but hopefully I covered everything good for people. Again, we can talk about this more in depth. And if there are no questions, we can conclude the workshop for today. And I appreciate everybody spending time with us this afternoon. Enjoy the snow.